Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a very special video. And today I'm going to be talking about Dune Part 2. No, not the film, of course. I have not seen it yet. We'll be reviewing it as soon as we do. But we are now 3 weeks away from it releasing in cinemas for everybody to see. That's right, its worldwide launch is finally upon us. Friday the 1st of March after not just the delay with the strikes, but of course, even Part 1 being delayed all those years ago. Two films have had very troubled productions, not by their own fault, but I'm going to be talking about that alongside something else, something a bit different. I've not done one of these since The Batman came out in 2022 now. Christ, that was 2 years ago. I'm going to be recommending 5 films for you all to watch before Dune Part 2. And you might be wondering, what sort of arrogant person's telling us what to watch before this? And also, no, I'm not going to be telling you to watch Dune Part 1. Of course, you should rewatch Dune Part 1. It's out in cinemas this weekend if you're watching it. Of course, you can pick it up wherever you can on home media. I think it's on Netflix here in the UK, so you can find Dune 1 easy. But I'm trying to do this in a very different way where maybe I've got a couple of new actors, or I'm trying to get people up to date on what some of the cast or crew may have been working on over the last couple of years in between films. So it's a very different type of video. It's technically a list video, I guess we could say, but it's nothing too intense, nothing too deep. But as always, I do want to comment. Hear from you all in the comments. Let me know recommendations you might have. People have got a few weeks to watch a few more films before Dune. What do you recommend? Anything from Denis Villeneuve, anything from Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, maybe it's some behind the scenes, maybe it's Hans Zimmer with another insane soundtrack. Whatever you think, do comment. I'm curious to know what you're going to be picking. I'm going to start going through mine in a couple of moments. And the reason I'm doing 5, we're 3 weeks away, I'm not going to recommend 10, 15, 20 films to watch. You could do anything for any actor in this cast or Part 1. So it's a really different video, but without further ado, it's time to get started. And I'm actually going to kickstart with something a bit different. I'm going to talk about Greg Fraiser, cinematography, who I believe won his Oscar on the first film. Everyone's naturally excited for him to come back to this. And he was involved with one of my favourite films of last year, a film I've spoken about on the channel a couple of times before. I even did another review on it recently. I'm of course talking about The Creator, directed by Gareth Edwards, released last year. Now this is available to pick up 4K, however you want to buy your films. Get it on the best format you can. It's nominated for Oscars, but you might be wondering what's the Greg Fraiser connection. He did work on The Creator to a point. Now, the cinematography in that film is incredible, but it's a two-person team. It was very much Greg Fraiser involved, I believe, in the pre-production, and I guess when the Dune filming date started, of course, he'd worked with Gareth Edwards on Rogue One. He had to leave the production of The Creator to do Dune Part 2, so he had a very heavy involvement with the pre-production, setting up the shoots. I believe also with the ILM connections was involved. Of course, helped not just with Rogue One, he helped develop the technology for The Mandalorian. But he's clearly had a big impact on that film. Of course, if you want to look how it's shot, look no further than Gareth Edwards' interviews. It was almost it was pretty much entirely on location, on a guerrilla budget of sorts. So I think there's a really fascinating comparison there that we can sort of see what Greg Fraiser was working on whilst making Dune Part 2 with The Creator. So that's me plugging The Creator once more, an unbelievable science fiction film. Please seek it out if you have not already. Yes, it's a cheap shot to throw in there because Greg Fraiser didn't directly go on the shoot, but he's still involved at that capacity. So that's my first recommendation. The second one, I'm going to start talking about some of our cast members now. And there's a few new faces in Dune Part 2. I'm going to be talking about maybe the 3 most obvious ones. There is another big name that's been cast, but I don't know if people are meant to know he's been cast. I'm not going to talk about him. But let's kickstart with the most obvious one, the man of the moment, somebody I adore. I've spoken about recently on the channel with an incredible new series on Apple. Austin Butler, of course, is cast in this film, playing the younger brother, the youngest Harkonnen, and quite comfortably one of the most intriguing castings, not just because he can't do the Elvis voice, not just because he's got to wear the bald cap. The role he's playing in Fade is one of the most important roles in this entire film, notably absent in Part 1, makes the build-up for the Part 2 hype even more. And who did then he cast? Of course, one of the best young actors, one of the rising stars, Austin Butler. I adore him. I mentioned that already. I'm repeating myself. He has fans galore. He has natural charisma. He is, I think, like a golden age of cinema idol in the modern day. And the film I'm going to pick for you guys to watch, which isn't the most obvious one, it's not Elvis, because that's just too easy, isn't it? I want to go back to something a couple of years ago. He's been in the news talking about this recently, but it's of course Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Some people might be wondering, was he even in that film? Yes, he was. He played Tex in it, and the kind of reason I'm jumping with this is he's come on leaps and bounds since then. He's been cast in a lot more stuff. He's basically become the A-lister outright at this point. It's a very small supporting role, but you get to see him in a villainous role, which is far more akin to how he will be in Dune. Obviously, I'm not doing spoilers, I don't need to talk about Dune, but also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 2, of course, it's based off real life events to a degree. So if you don't know the film, you're curious about who he's playing, he's part of the Manson family. If you have seen the film, you of course know what happens in the film with respect to that. So that's a really quick and easy one for Austin Butler. And as I said, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's one of my favourite films. You can actually see it behind me. I've had the quad poster since it came out. And yes, he's great from the scenes we get him in that. Funny story, the first time I watched it, I thought that was Adam Driver and a big cast and none of us knew. Yeah, very different to what we're going to have with respect to hair in this film. But following up Austin Butler, we've got a couple of other new actors we're going to talk about. Christopher Walken is playing the Emperor. Again, you're looking at the... I mean, you can look at Dune Part 1's cast as well as Part 2 so far. I think it's been one of the best cast films of our lifetimes. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I think we'll be looking at Dune in 10, 20 years with respect to how the cast go on. I think we've got Oscar winners all over the place with Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet. I mentioned Austin Butler already. If you're going to cast the Emperor for this, you need somebody with a bit of gravitas. You need somebody that's not just got a history, but they've got a presence within the industry. And Christopher Walken being cast is by far one of the most intriguing casting concepts. It isn't an Emperor Palpatine type. Of course, Star Wars is very much influenced by Dune, but it's a really interesting casting. And I think when you think with this role, for those that have read the book like myself, there's so many different ways they could go with this. And I think there are so many actors you could pick to play a role such as this. Some maybe cast to death in or villainous role, insert this person. Some people are going to naturally think of Star Wars, is why I mentioned it, because it's the most famous Emperor in film, is Palpatine. But bringing Christopher Walken in makes it a really interesting proposition. I'm going to go for something a bit older, something I saw for the first time last year, which is The Deer Hunter. Yes, it's Christopher Walken's probably most famous film. There's probably something really obvious that's in the front of my mind. People are going to talk about Batman Returns, but I believe it's the film he won his Oscar for. And it's one that, when you have these Vietnam War films, I find really interesting. I think the most interesting war films, as much as I like action, I spoke about Master of the Air, Band of Brothers recently, I like the films that go through the human experience and what war can do from an emotional perspective on people, to their minds. And The Deer Hunter is absolutely that. An incredible film, also starring Robert De Niro, John Cazale, so many legends in the same film, and Christopher Walken is the one you end up talking about from that. But then how do you follow up talking Christopher Walken, one of the best actors of our lifetime, and I guess I'm going to talk about Florence Pugh next. Of course, she's playing Princess in this film. Yes, if you're familiar with what happens in Messiah as well, this is very much a role that could continue into multiple films. I think that's what people know. I'm not going to talk about the ending of this. I'm not going to talk about Messiah. I'm keeping this very much spoiler-free for people that haven't read the books. That's very fair. I was the same until the first Dune came out. I hadn't read it until literally the train journey, and I got up to the halfway point where the film finished. I was very, very lucky. But Florence Pugh's a tricky one because everybody's seen so many of her new films. I'm not going to put something for like Oppenheimer, not only because it's so recent that everyone's probably seen it. She has a very small role in that. I wanted to try and think of a film of hers where she's in a lead role. And it takes me to something where it's a film I'm not too sure if people are comfortable with. It might not be the best film to demonstrate how far she's come on as an actress. It's certainly a very different role to what she's going to be playing in Dune. But I'm going back to Fighting With My Family, which is a really interesting film for those that are not into wrestling. I think I spoke about it on the channel before, but it tells the story of Paige, Saraya, for those that watch AEW. And essentially there's a documentary made 11, 12 years ago now on Paige's family. They ran a wrestling promotion back in Norwich, and she was almost a teenager at this point. That is what led to not her getting WWE trials, but essentially The Rock, we're going to talk about him. The Rock saw this documentary whilst he was shooting Fast 5 in London, or Fast 6 in London, and he decided to get the film rights for it. He decided to put himself into this main event, into the film, he's trying to put himself in the main event of WrestleMania, and suddenly the Soraya story, Paige's story, has to have The Rock all over it, as you do Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I really want to get into that stuff. Hashtag we want Cody, all that sort of stuff. I shouldn't really divert, but that's what he does. Dwayne Johnson comes and goes and steals the limelight from people. But going back to Florence Pugh's performance, it's one of the first films I saw of her with her in a lead role, which absolutely smashes it. And I think as we've seen her in so many films since, she's not only, I don't want to say come on leaps and bounds, but to do a really physical performance in a wrestling film where she was being trained to do wrestling. We've just had the Iron Claw come out. We've seen how incredible that film was. It's a really interesting one for people to go back to if they are curious. And I guess, I keep making digs to The Rock. It's very timely with, once again, him coming in and stealing the story and not letting others tell their own. So, Fight With My Family, I think you can watch it pretty much everywhere now. It's been out for years. It's a really great film. It's a really heartwarming film. It's got some great actors in. You've got Lena Headey, you've got Nick Frost as well, a few others. Very much worth watching, and Vince Vaughn as well. And that's been 4 different recommendations. And I'm going to go with the 5th one. I'm going to carry on talking about wrestling. Because I'm going to talk about Big Dave Bautista, one of my favourite wrestlers growing up. I spoke about him a lot over the years on this channel. I've spoke about him appearing in Blade Runner 2049. And it sounds weird to say you can be proud of an actor that you don't know, let alone that you see on screen. But growing up, Batista was my favourite wrestler. And like The Rock, like John Cena, we see him transition into Hollywood. It doesn't work for all the wrestlers, it does work for some. Batista's been the first one. And maybe I'm understating John Cena's potential here, but Batista, I feel like the first one that has dropped the sense of wrestler turned actor. Yes, a lot of people will still think that, but I think Batista's done so much in his own career in Hollywood. Yes, people are going to talk about Drax and Guardians of the Galaxy. It could be so easy to talk about those. It could be so easy to look at some of his action comedies, but I'm not going to go Blade Runner either. Again, that one scene, 2049, I think has changed his whole career for the better. I'm going to talk about one of the films I saw him in a lead role, which was magnificent in, and it came out last year's M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin Door. I absolutely love this film. With Shyamalan, you're going to get an original story, something different, maybe something that doesn't work for everybody. But with this one, with Batista, I got to see him in a lead role where he hasn't been cast because he's ripped, because he's Batista. He's been cast because of his acting ability, and he's very good in this. And I'm not just saying that, it's because I like Batista, he's here. I think if we're looking at the Dune cast, we're looking at the people that have come back for part 2 that were in part 1. I think we're going to get more of Batista in this film than we did in part 1. I think he was somewhat underused in that. And that was something I was partially gutted by. Again, not that I can really fault Dune Part 1, it's an incredible film, but the Harkonnens didn't get as much depth as I'd have liked. I think with Austin Butler being brought into it, playing Batista's younger brother, which is actually insane now I say that out loud, I think we're going to get more from those two together. I think we're going to get more from the Baron, and it's something I'm really looking forward to in part 2. And if you're looking to see a bit more from Batista, see him in a more dramatic role as such, then definitely watch Knock at the Cabin Door. Again, released from last year, I thought was a very, very good film. It might not be for everybody, but his performance stuck with me, and I cannot wait to see him in more dramatic films such as this. And once again, seeing him back with Denny is very exciting from both a wrestling fan's perspective and a film fan's perspective. So massive shout out to Batista, one of my absolute favourites. And that's going to kind of round out this video. I've spoke about 5 films that people should be watching. I do want to hear from others. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you think there's other films I should be watching from some of the other actors? I'm curious to know your thoughts. I've mentioned there's a lot of stuff happening on our channel with Dune. This is the first video. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Dune Part 1. At some point in the next week, there'll be dates confirmed on our social medias. We're going to be having, of course, a spoiler-free review, which will go up just after the embargo. So we're looking at Wednesday, the 21st of February. Yes, we are very, very lucky. We're going to be watching it early, and we'll keep that spoiler-free once the film is out. We're going to be doing a big review, of course, on the film. We can talk about the whole thing. We can ask if they nailed, the first book as a whole. Maybe there'll be a video previewing if we are going to get Dune Messiah. There's going to be a review on June 1984 now that parts 1 and 2 would have been seen. So there's a lot of stuff happening on the channel. This is the very first one. It's a very special interview also planned. And once that's up on the channel, I'm not tempting fate until it's up on the channel, essentially. So I'm very excited to be continuing with that. And like I said, I'm handing over to people at home. So do comment your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, what you're looking forward to, how will you be watching Dune. Have you got your IMAX booked? Are you going to track it down for 70mm? I'll be trying to see it again in 70mm. But yes, this is going to do for this video. So once again, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.